Okay, everybody, we're going to get started. Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Kyle Kassler, and I'm a Senior Program Associate for the Stevens Initiative, where I work on alumni engagement. Today, we are going to talk about learning in digital or virtual environments, an increasingly important topic in all of our lives. We are happy to frame today's discussion using the experiences and skills of our Stevens Initiative alumni to explore successful strategies for learning in virtual spaces. This webinar is brought to you by the Stevens Initiative, an international effort to build global competence for young people in the United States and the Middle East and North Africa by growing and enhancing the field of virtual exchange. The initiative is a lasting tribute to Ambassador Chris Stevens, who dedicated his life to connecting people in the United States with people in the Middle East and North Africa. The initiative supports many different virtual exchange programs, including many of the programs of the virtual exchange alumni listening in on this webinar today. The Stevens Initiative is committed to bringing opportunities like today's webinar to you, our alumni, so you can continue to learn. We are also happy to create an opportunity like today to allow others, including teachers and educators who are interested in virtual exchange, to learn from our alumni experts. The Stevens Initiative, conceived and developed in close partnership with the family of Ambassador Stevens, was launched in 2015 and is sponsored by the United States Department of State, with funding provided by the US government and administered by the Aspen Institute. Additional funding is provided by the Bezos Family Foundation and the governments of Morocco and the United Arab Emirates. Today, we're going to cover a couple of different items. First, I'm going to talk about some common skills that are developed through virtual exchange and how those might apply to the new reality that many of us are going to enter into this coming school year. That new reality will certainly include increased amounts of distance learning because of the coronavirus pandemic. Afterwards, I will introduce our panel of speakers. And after the introduction, our panel will come on screen and answer some questions about how to use those skills for virtual learning in this new reality. After the panel discussion, we have some time saved for you, our listeners, to ask questions. You can send in your questions at any time during this webinar, even now, using the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. So I want to move forward really quickly so we have enough time to really listen to our panel of alumni experts. But first, I think it's important to talk about some common virtual exchange skills and how they apply to distance learning environments. So first, I want to talk about virtual exchange and digital learning because sometimes this can get confusing. There are lots of phrases that people use to describe distance learning. It could be remote learning, virtual school, a whole bunch of different terms. Many of these terms describe a similar circumstance when students in schools or universities don't go to class in person, but rather learn through online activities. These activities might be live or recorded or text-based. Whatever they are, we know that because of the coronavirus pandemic, many more students are going to continue learning online this fall semester, and maybe even in the spring. Virtual exchange, on the other hand, is a type of digital learning. Virtual exchange is when young people in different geographic locations are connected with each other through technology to learn and collaborate together over a period of time. Since we know that more young people are going to be doing virtual learning this fall, many students and teachers are asking the same question. How can I make this situation the best it can be? Young people want to be able to learn and connect with their peers, and teachers want to help facilitate that. So we think that lessons from successful virtual exchange programs can help because virtual exchanges use technology to learn in a similar way. In our research and evaluation, the Stevens Initiative has identified many outcomes of participating in virtual exchanges, including some of those listed here, or including those listed here among others. Cross-cultural communication, or the ability to speak with and understand someone who is different than you, virtual teamwork or collaboration, which means the ability to work in a group or to accomplish a task or learn from each other online, and technical skills, by which we mean the ability to use software and platforms to connect virtually in addition to other specific skills from a program. All of these skills can be directly applied to distance learning environments that students will face this fall. When students are able to collaborate virtually or communicate with someone who is different than they are, or accomplish a learning task virtually on a new platform, this means that they can still engage and learn, even if it is not in a classroom. I want to give as much time as possible, so let's turn to our panelists to learn about how they can recommend or how they recommend developing or using these skills or other strategies for success in this coming semester. So first, I want to introduce our panelist. Andre Eisenberg is a second-year international relations major at the University of Rochester in New York. Born and raised in a Brazilian and Argentine apartment in New York City, Andre is a Global Nomads Group alumnus and youth facilitator. He is a member of the G&G Youth Brain Trust, which helps shape, test, and provide feedback on new program innovations. Global Nomads Group is an organization that provides virtual exchange to young people all over the world. The Stevens Initiative supports Global Nomads Group Campfire program that focuses on virtual storytelling, an interdisciplinary and powerful vehicle for youth to build empathy, self-awareness, and global understanding. Global Nomads Group is currently offering their virtual exchange programs to individual students or for teachers, and you can sign up today. If you'd like to, visit their website at gng.org to learn more. Our next panelist is Shaima Jahouri, an international trade and commerce master's student at Kangwon National University in the Republic of Korea. She is from Marrakesh, Morocco, and she attended Qadi Ayad University and graduated with an international management bachelor's degree. Her first experience with virtual exchange was through the Yala Academy's Aline Getty School for a Citizen Journalism and Peacebuilding program sponsored by the European Union for the MENA region. Afterwards, she joined the MENA Michigan Initiative for Global Action through Entrepreneurship Program, what we call M Squared Gate, implemented by the William Davidson Institute at the University of Michigan and sponsored by the Stevens Initiative. The M Squared Gate program connects students across cultures to develop social entrepreneurship projects using virtual resources. Samuel Owusu is a fourth-year international relations and education major at Davidson College in North Carolina. He is from Chicago, Illinois, and attended Lindblom High School. At Lindblom, Sam became interested in Arabic and the Middle East through his language classes. His first experience with virtual education exchange was through the STEAM Museum initiative, implemented by Chicago Sister Cities International. This program, supported by the Stevens Initiative, provided a cross-cultural exchange for Lindblom students and students from Casablanca, Morocco. Students in the program created an online exhibit that highlighted their creativity, cultural roots, and competencies in science, math, and technology. After participating in the STEAM Museum, Sam has continued his study of Arabic and Middle Eastern culture through virtual language platforms such as Natakalam and 2 education abroad experiences to Jordan and Lebanon. Now, at long last, I'm going to turn off this presentation and ask our panelists to turn on their cameras so we can kick off the conversation. Hi, everybody. It's so nice to see you today. Happy to get started. Just to make sure everybody can hear me right? Okay, and everybody can go ahead and turn on your mics.
Hello,
awesome.
Everyone.
Awesome. Hello, everybody.
Great, so we are going to get started. I'm going to start with our opening introductory question. And maybe, Andre, I'll ask you to answer the question first, okay? And then we can kick it over to the others. So my first question for you all is, what is one skill or ability that you gained in your virtual exchange that you've either already used kind of in this new remote learning world, or that you plan to use in this coming semester?
Yeah. How's it going, everyone? So yeah, I think one of the biggest skills that I've gained from doing online learning in the fall, as well as through some of G&G's programs, is the active listening. So pretty much it's just like pretty much what we're doing right now of just being able to engage with the people you're talking with your teachers, your fellow students, and really being able to and actually like developing the importance of your appearances, because like now, since through online learning and through like this shift towards virtual learning, we won't be able to talk with each other physically, right? So I think being able to talk with each other and notice each other's like sign languages and just like our notions of attentiveness pretty much within the conversation is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. Like active listening means a whole new thing when it's done virtually, right? That's definitely true. Shaima, what about you? What's a skill or ability that you wanted to talk about?
So hello everyone first. Thank you for having me today. So for one skill that I would definitely mention every time I talk about learning online, it is effective and appropriate communication skills. So actually during my M Square Gate program, there was many miscommunications, and the biggest one happened for like a week, and it required this required me to learn how to communicate well. So I believe that effective communication through digital learning, it can be really hard, but also it can be really effective, and it will show us how to listen to the other person and how to express our ideas clearly, because there are so many cultural differences which doesn't always allow us to get the idea really easily.
Yeah, and Shaima, that's so good because you mentioned like both, like there can be lots of challenges to it. One, like maybe it's like technical or like virtual, like something to do with like the computer aspect of communication, or maybe it's just like a cultural thing that doesn't only happen when people communicate from like one country to another. It could just be on a campus. We lots of cultures are represented, and so like learning how to communicate, how to effectively communicate with people, such an important skill in life, and even more so now when our communication is kind of limited to these squares sometimes. That's great.
Exactly, and also it can be like a lack of language, because not all of us speak each other's languages fluently.
Hmm.
So it can just be misunderstood in words.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Sam, what about you?
Yeah, I just want to start off by saying thank you for hosting this webinar. It's really great to see such great panelists and talk about this virtual learning environment that we're embarking upon. So I want to start with that. And I think that in my experience with virtual exchange, whether it be through Stevens Initiative sponsored projects with the Chicago Sister Cities or with Netha Kellen platforms or with other online language programs, I think the biggest takeaway that I always have is that my cultural competency skills are being developed in that moment. And what I mean by that is the fact that every single time I talk to someone in a virtual space from another cultural background or geographic background, I understand a little bit more about where that person is coming from, and the implicit social cues that present themselves even on an online platform. So I'll give you an example, particularly with the Stevens Initiative project, the Steve Museum. We were working with younger students at the time. I was a senior in high school, and we kind of understood when sort of our jokes or our sort of like little slang words didn't come across to them the same way. In the sense that those students weren't laughing as hard as we were, so you kind of understand sort of like where the miscommunication can begin, and then you kind of understand what they see when they see you from the screen and what you see on the other side. I think Chima made a good point that on the technical side, you kind of understand a lot more of the context of what is available across different regions of the world. Like if people are struggling with internet access, if people have really great internet access, and we kind of like struggle through that together or learn through that together, where people are coming from and what their cultural context is. So I think the biggest thing I learned through all of my virtual exchanges is that cultural competency is a hugely important skill, and it's becoming much more important in this virtual environment. So
Yeah, I like what I like about all these answers are there like three definite skills that we're coming into. We hear a lot about like challenges, like, oh, this is like virtual learning is terrible, it's hard, like people, it's not working. But we know that like these three skills like aren't just unique maybe to you three, even though like I think you described them really well. But like active listening, like effective communication, like being culturally competent, those skills can be developed in lots of different ways. And so like using them in this new virtual context is really important. And so I'm glad that we like started talking from like what skills we already have first, but now let's like think a little bit about common challenges to distance learning. And I think you all have mentioned a couple of them so far. A lot of what we hear these days about like moving towards virtual learning, or like, you know, being in a virtual learning reality this coming fall, is that it's hard. It's hard for lots of different people. But usually I think when we listen to the news or we read anything, it's usually like teachers or policymakers saying like, this is why virtual learning doesn't work. But I want you three as like students to talk to us a little bit about like challenges. So my next question for you all, and maybe Shaima, maybe you can start with the answer here, is what challenges do you think are common for students regarding distance learning? Like, and yeah, and go from there. What do you think is going to come up?
Actually, for me, I believe that having access to technology is a really huge issue, especially if I talk about the MENA region, or the region that I know the most. However, if we just consider that there is appropriate access to internet, to computers, and all that, I believe that it is really difficult to get into a healthy routine and be productive with the online learning. Also, there are mental health challenges because we are stuck at home almost all the day long. And since everything is online, I believe that for so many students, things feel less important, if that's the appropriate word to describe it. So there is a different perspection of what levels of commitment. It depends on each person. And I believe that all these, like, we can gather them in an atmosphere that makes e-learning fun sometimes, but really challenging most of the time.
Yeah, no, I appreciate what you say, because I think that's not like the one thing that you mentioned, I don't hear a lot of people talk about, but I think is very true, is like kind of because everything is online and we don't have to go anywhere in person or show up to learning events in person, the stakes seem lower. So it's easier to just like not commit or to like disengage. And so I think that's something that is a really big challenge. When you don't have to go, or when like my physical presence isn't required, like the stakes are lower, and that has issues for like commitment or for follow through. And so I think that's really important to bring up. Andre, like, do you want to go next? What do you think some of those challenges are going to be from a
Yeah,
student
no,
perspective?
awesome. Yeah, no, I totally agree with what Shaima was saying. And just adding on to that, I think what comes with that, with like this, pretty much not going anywhere, not preparing to go to certain events or classes, is just this all comes with like a lack of motivation, which I did also like struggle a lot in when we transitioned to online learning in spring. And you know, it's just like being, because you're pretty much inside all day, and you know, so many people are like, we're all going through like this whole coronavirus thing, and all these other issues that our world is facing together. But at the same time, a lot of us are being affected disproportionately. You know, so everyone is going through different challenges, like similar and different challenges, right? So it's just like a combination of things that are going on at home, in your community, and just being stuck at home inside. Also, like what Chen was saying with mental health issues, because all of a sudden you're not, I mean, let's say for people who are going to either high school or on a college campus, you're always surrounded with your friends and with faculty. So like whenever you're struggling with anyone, like you're there, your friends are there. You have your own independence. You know, where all of a sudden, like now, a lot of people are back at home, stuck in the same room with like one or two siblings, as I am, or I was. And it's just like it's this whole balance, because like all these things that are happening at home, and with trying to stay at home and go to all your classes, doing all your work. It's just a lot. It's a lot that different people are being affected differently, you know. So I think just being like this like the social aspect, as well as just like the lack of motivation, is a really big issue.
Yeah, and I like how you say like those, that's not just in learning, right? That's not just like virtual learning. Like all of these kind of challenges for our new like lived reality are like mutually reinforcing, or like they affect each other. So like because I can't hang out with my friends means like it's harder for me to be motivated to go to a classroom to learn. Like some of the motivations that maybe would have gotten me there aren't there, and so they like affect each other. I think that's a big challenge too.
And
Sam,
it's not, yeah, just,
yeah, go
I'm
ahead.
sorry, just quickly. It's also, it's like, yeah, like you're saying, sometimes it's just the little things. It's not like like sometimes the big things are often like the things that affect your online learning, but also sometimes it's just those little things that we often don't really think about.
Yeah, and they like build up. Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree. Yeah. Sam, when we were talking about this webinar earlier, you had a really good point or like a challenge to bring up that I hadn't really thought about before, about like anxiety and about like living in these like little boxes on our computer screens. Do you want to explore that a little bit?
Yeah, I think that with any class or any learning environment, digital or in person or anywhere, there's a fair amount of, just on average, anxiety that's present, especially on the first day. You know, you're trying to figure out who will be your new friends, who will be new community members. Like the space itself is where a lot of people define what their community is. And a lot of times now, in today's world, I think with a virtual learning environment, a lot of people feel as though that sense of community has been taken, sort of.
Yeah.
What I mean by that is that now people don't have that proximity to make friends or to make social connections or to work on group projects like in a normal in sort of what they have defined as the normal. And I think that with that level of anxiety, it's really tough for educators and students alike to navigate how to manage that, because you're on Zoom for hours and hours on a time, so you're getting so much screen time and you're fatigued and you're doing all of that. And for some students, they may not even feel like they're building any communal trust. And I think that adds to the level of anxiety. I think that I was talking with a professor who's a good contact of mine at Elon University, Professor Peter Felton, and he focuses mainly on the fact that learning can't happen without relationships. Like primarily he's interested in talking about relationship rich learning.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that this virtual environment presents a new challenge for us because most humans and most people define our relationships by the fact that we get to see the person we love or the person we work with or the person we consider our friend every single day in person. And this virtual learning environment makes it a little bit seem like there's a little bit of a disconnect.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a challenge that educators and students alike will have to face, going forward.
Yeah, I like especially the framing at the end where you're talking about like it's not that like those relationships like like learning together relationships like can't be formed virtually. It's just that like maybe humans or maybe us like we just haven't really done that before, and so like we have to think about how does that happen, or how can that happen effectively in a virtual space. And so which is I think a good transition to like our next topic. So we talked a little bit about like what skills you all are going to use, and then we talked about some common challenges from a student perspective. But now I want to talk a little bit about like the three of you have engaged in virtual exchange, like talking to a student from somewhere else to learn or collaborate on a project or learn from each other before. So that's unique to you. Not every student that is engaging in virtual learning has had that experience, but you three have, and hopefully a lot of the people listening today have also. And so maybe if you were talking to other virtual exchange alumni, or maybe other students that didn't get a chance to talk about or to participate in virtual exchange, what are some successful strategies that you have seen in virtual exchange that might be applicable to other distance learning environments? So yeah, we want to talk about like what are some successful strategies in virtual exchange that that students can use in just like maybe a common distance learning class. And when we were talking about this, Shaima, I think you had a really good point that I wanted to start out with, and then I'll kind of redirect the question for Andre and Sam. So Shaima, what were you, when we were talking about this, what did you come up with?
Actually, when I just heard this question, the first thing that I thought, which is about being consistent in forming a relationship with the classmates. and trying to communicate with
So what,
them.
like what Sam was just talking about, right? That's great. Yeah.
Exactly,
Yeah,
exactly.
perfect.
And trying to communicate with them as much as possible,
Mhm.
trying to build these relationships. Like, for example, in M Square Gate program, even though we had participants from either Morocco and the US, but we were trying together all the time, face to face, and also have calls outside of the program, so we can communicate about our personal issues, about our studies, about our personal life.
Yeah.
Also, like, in order to try, like, this will help so much to form a relationship outside of the program or the class, in case of the e-learning in class. Also, I believe that it is really important to be fully present when participating in virtual learning, and just to consider it as a normal class, and
Yeah.
like show on time, limit all the distractions, now with social media and all what we have going around.
Yeah.
And also, I believe that to try as much as we can to work in teams, because this will help us be team players in later if we go to a workplace.
Yeah, no, I think these suggestions are so good, and this is something that I'm sure you learned in your virtual exchange. Like, these are, and so many of these, unlike like in-person learning things, are like self-motivated, right? Like,
Exactly.
I have to be trying to reach out to other students and like forming a relationship, or I need to remind myself to be fully present, because in a class, I can, like, people will notice if I'm not paying attention. But for us all here, like, my phone is right here in my hand, right? And if I hold it down here, you all don't know that. And so it's so easy to like just look at my phone, or to look up another window on my screen and like check out Instagram, and like then I'm not present, and you don't necessarily know that. And so the burden is on me, or like in this case on all of us as students, right, to be fully present in the learning, and that motivation has to come from ourselves. I just think that's such a good skill or advice to give to students going into this new reality. When we were talking about this topic, it's interesting because both Sam and Andre came up with something that was a little bit similar, but maybe it was more like advice around how students can like advocate for their needs. And I think, Sam, I want to start with you. How would you say like students in this new reality should advocate for themselves with their educators or with others?
Definitely. I think that when it comes to advocating for oneself, it just comes down to the simple fact that in this virtual world, I know we feel distant, but it gives us the opportunity to really connect and really empathize with each other and what each of us are going through. I mean, I think we all deal with, as humans, we deal with our own personal struggles. And I think that direct and honest communication about what is going on in your personal life and what is going on that day that you're working with a group project, or you're working with a professor, or you're working with a teacher or an instructor, can go a really long way to building a relationship. I often think when I'm working on teams now for school-related projects or for research that I appreciate it when my team members can come to me and say, yo, I really have a lot going on a day, or saying, I really want to help you out on this project, or I really want to help you out on the initiative or your side of the project, because I understand that you have a lot going on right now. So I think that direct and honest communication, and I know it's really hard with, you're not physically present with the person. So you don't at first, you're kind of anxious about, oh, are they going to respond negatively or positively to this, to me being upfront with them. But I think that doing that goes a long way to build the relationship and build a genuine relationship with whoever you may be working with on a team, or if you're working with a professor on something, or if you're just trying to seek advice from professors. I think that now more than ever, professors are learning how to become more open and sorry about that, allergies, and more understanding to personal circumstances that may inhibit the learning process. So I think that keeping a clear and open and direct line of communication, being honest and being empathetic to every scenario is just a good rule of thumb, sort of going into that, because it eliminates the hierarchy that students may have with professors, and it eliminates the level of intimidation we may feel working in these virtual settings and in groups. So
Yeah, definitely. And it seems like there's like a common theme here. Like, a lot of what we're talking about today is like new ways to like either form or maintain or like relationships, right? Like if that's with your professors or your teachers or with your fellow students, like a lot of this new virtual thing is like, well, I can't kind of just like stay after class and ask a question, or I can't like say like, hey, come to class like 5 minutes early, teammate, and we can talk about a presentation really quick then. So like really kind of figuring out new ways to do that kind of stuff. So in the same way that like Sam was talking about, what is a way that students can like advocate for themselves to teachers, when we were having this conversation, Andre, you said something really interesting, or you had like a message to like, I think professors or educators about like, how should they behave or how should they act towards their students in this new time?
Yeah, I think just adding on to what Sam was saying, I think it goes both ways. Where I think if a student knows that they need certain resources in order for them to help themselves concentrate and do well and succeed in their learning environment, they do need. I think it'd be much better. It's great for them to reach out to their professors and to their educators and to make sure those resources are available to themselves. But at the same time, that being said, I think that the educator has played a really, really important role, especially now with all this going on, in their ability to reach out to their students, right? Because I think as a student, if I have a teacher that's always like at least weekly sending emails and checking in on us, and making sure as much as possible that each of our classes are as interactive as possible, that we could see each other's faces, and that I'm hearing from them a lot, I think I feel a lot more encouraged and motivated to attend those classes and to do my work. Because, even just the simple fact of, if let's say like an educator doesn't reach out that much and you don't hear from them that much, and you're struggling with like going to classes and just like going on your phone and watching Netflix, it's like, if you don't really see that that professor, and you don't really see that there is a relationship, like as Shaima and Sam were saying, like if there is no relationship with you and the professor in the first place, it's a really, really like hard thing for you to just act. I mean, it makes it much easier for you just to not really care, and for not, and for you to not be motivated. So I think it really does go both ways. And look, for me, and I don't want to say it's easy, because for me in the spring semester, I've had a lot of problems at home with the whole coronavirus thing. And it's not the easiest thing to like just reach out and tell like a professor about something that's very personal to you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you just want to just like shut your computer down and not do anything and not care about anything.
Yeah.
And but I do think that I really do recommend, if you're struggling with anything, because your professors do know that a lot of people are struggling with different things to different extents. So do your best to reach out to your professor and to those people who can provide you with the resources if you're not having them. But then again, like a message to educators and to professors, I just say to do your best to reach out as much as possible, and to like try to keep your class and your students engaged. Yeah.
No, I think this is so good, because like we know that professors or educators or teachers like really just want their students to succeed, and they know that this new environment is difficult for students. And so there are some like really easy, or maybe like some basic things that those people can do to signal to their students that they're open, right? Like I don't need to be like extremely strict. Like I know that lots are going on, so these are the expectations. Communicate me if we can't meet those expectations, and try. So, and just like signaling that is a huge step. So I think that's really, really helpful.
Is it all right if I add one thing? Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think that when you're talking about signaling that a professor is ready to provide support, I think, and we talked about this before, a really great way of getting to know students is understanding, particularly being cognizant of if a student is struggling with a mental hurdle or disability, or struggling with any sort of cognitive disconnect that may impede their learning process. And a quick example, I think, in my virtual learning experience is this past summer, I took virtual learning classes in public policy and statistics. And it was a great time. And I noticed, particularly from one of my lecturers, that she was very cognizant of if students needed accommodations and if students needed special permissions or everything. And she mentioned that up front. But I think one thing that stuck out to me about this professor was the simple fact that in her lectures and modules, she used strategies with virtual learning technologies like dictation. I think that's super important because I think that she went in understanding that some students may struggle with severe hearing loss or maybe deaf. We don't really know those things, but really having those resources up front sort of signals to students that I have sort of tried to leave no stone unturned in terms of providing the best academic accommodation. And I think that goes a long way for students because even if you don't necessarily need those resources, you know that that's on the mind of educators. Like that's what they're thinking about is like, how can I make this new learning environment, which isn't ideal, as productive as possible for my students. So just an add.
No, this is so great because we're starting to go to like our next area where I wanted to talk a little bit about how educators, teachers, professors should think about like what they should think about when they design digital learning environments, especially like advice from you all who have participated in those before. Before I ask like Shaima to join in that discussion, I want to remind everybody listening to send in some questions using the Q&A box at the bottom. We're gonna like in just a couple of minutes transition into answering some of your questions. So if you want to type those questions in now, I'll be able to ask them to our panelists. But going back to that topic about like what should teachers or professors think about when designing a digital learning environment. When we were talking about this, Shaima, I think you had a really good like direct answer, like of what people should think about.
Actually, before talking about how to design the course, I would like to ask the teachers and professors to make sure that they have the technical skills needed so they can manage an e-learning session. And second, I believe that it will be really good to always add a visual appeal, which helps with engagement. This can replace the gestures that usually happens in class and nonverbal cues, and also it helps the body language of the teacher while speaking in class, in the classroom. Because this, like for example, the body language of the professor, it helps a lot in learning. So since in the e-learning atmosphere, it can happen. So I believe that, for example, pictures, videos, it will help a lot. Also, I believe that educators should always be sure that their students understand what's being taught. So for example, after finishing the course, they can have a few questions they can ask to different students randomly, for example, to make sure that everyone is on the same page and everyone understood the course properly and as it was meant to be.
Yeah. I think that's good. This is again, like we're adapting to a new environment, right? We're adapting to a new change, and in the same way, we have to learn how to like form relationships with our classmates or with our teachers. I think there is a burden on educators, and I think it is hard, but like to learn like new technological platforms or to learn new things. But in the same way that like educators, professors have always had to do like professional development before, like learn new ways of teaching or learning new content to share with their students. This is another one of those like professional development steps where like students aren't going to engage with you if you can't use the platforms that you need to. They're just not. And so I think that is definitely something that should be identified that professors, teachers should prioritize. I think that's really good.
Yeah, exactly. And just one
yeah,
small thing that I would like to add, which is while designing a whole course, it would be really nice if they can find gap times or give some times for students to interact with each other. I would take, for example, like in my school, like when we are studying dialogues or when we have like a panel or something, there is this option in Zoom application where you can put people in different rooms and the teacher or professor can keep checking and tracking everyone what they are doing. So I believe that this can also make people closer to each other, because sometimes when we finish early we keep talking about our personal lives.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
this will help us create more relationship between each other.
Yeah. Like new monitoring, but also like, fostering that like relationship building. Like I think teachers and professors have a role in doing that for their students. Yeah, absolutely. That's true. I'm gonna stop us right here, not from the whole webinar, but we're gonna transition into some questions and answers because there are some really good questions and one particularly on this topic. And I know like we haven't maybe talked about this before, so think about it for a second. If someone has something off the top of their head that they'd like to respond, I think it's good. So there is a question from a professor who's designing a virtual exchange, or who's maybe getting ready to do a virtual learning course this fall, and they want to know about an activity that maybe you all could recommend. So would you share, the question is, would you share a relationship building activity that you did that you thought was helpful? So maybe some activity that a professor could design, or that a teacher could use in a virtual class that would help students form relationships. And so I wonder, yeah, what you all think.
Actually, I didn't think about this answer before, but
Yeah.
I this made me think about an activity that we had in an organization
Mm-hmm.
I was a member with, which is before every meeting we had like an ice breaking moment,
Mm-hmm.
in which the monitor of the of the whole conference or lesson, they do prepare few questions, but usually not the usual questions, which is like what's your name, how old are you, and all that. But they prepare like funny questions, which is kind of what was the most awkward moment that happened to you in life.
Yeah,
And this actually bring us closer to each other, and we keep remembering really funny stuff about each other.
sure.
Yeah, so I believe that this would be a really nice activity sometimes in the first class of the semester or something like this, so we can bring
Yeah.
people closer to each other.
Yeah, and maybe even like I think that's a really good activity. And then actually like joining that with maybe like breakout rooms. So if you have, a class of 20, you have 4 breakout rooms of 5, and they like, then students feel a little bit more comfortable sharing like one thing with like a couple of people, and they get to form like smaller relationships. And you were just talking about breakout rooms, and then doing this activity, like getting in a little bit deeper than like what's your name or what's one interesting thing about you, but just like, like what's one time that you were embarrassed, or like what's, like if you had like 3 wishes, like, like a little bit different types of questions. I think that's a good suggestion. Sam or Andre, I don't know if you have a like relationship forming activity that you could recommend that was good.
Yeah, one activity that I actually really like is um, one that I think that we did in one of the PG&G programs. I was asking how each participant's families cooked their rice,
Yeah.
because I know like rice is very essential to everyone. Um, I guess or yeah or food proportion in their own homes, and it's very important to a lot of people. So I think listen to the different ways that different families from different cultures and communities cooks rice is very interesting. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we lost you there for 1 second, but I think I got you. It's the question like, how does your family cook rice, right? Which is like this common like unifying like in every culture, like cultures cook rice, right? And so like, what is one way that your family does it? And so maybe like asking people to share about like their home culture, or like some cultural aspect is really really good. And I mean there are like tons of lists of those questions online that people could find, so they don't have to like get stuck like, oh, I can't think of a question. Like those resources exist. But the rice one, I've heard that maybe one other time, and I always thought it was really good. That's a good suggestion. Sam, I don't know if you had one that you wanted to share, and if not, that's okay.
Yeah, I have a small icebreaker, and it's very similar to Andre's. In a virtual learning course that I did this summer, my professor asked each of us what our favorite place in our hometown was, and
Mm.
everyone just went online and looked up special images. Like mine personally was the Chicago skyline because I love downtown.
Yeah.
And what the professor did uh, was he created a map, like an interactive map of each place. And we just kind of toured around with it throughout the year, and sort of like got to know where people were from. So I thought that was really cool.
Yeah.
Granted, he was a stats professor and he used like all of this coding and stuff. So it's very much so like it was very much so like he did it out of like his expertise and stuff like that. But I think there are ways like using virtual formats like Google Mapping and things like that, where professors who may not have the expertise in that can still mimic the experience. And I think that generally people like talking about where they're from. So it's really fun. It's a really fun exercise.
Yeah, I want to ask, so I want to get through a couple of other questions. So maybe I might just like shoot a couple of questions to individuals. And so one question that I have, and maybe I'm going to send this back to Sam, is a question about like, um, are there different challenges we should think of when it comes to students in high school versus students that are in universities in this new like virtual learning? And I want to shoot that to Sam because I know he did his virtual exchange when he was in high school, and now he's a university student and he has a lot of experience. And so I wanted to ask Sam, like you, that question, thinking about say like your virtual experience when you're in high school and maybe like this new reality now. What are some of the different challenges we should think of, like maybe educators should think of when it comes to high school versus higher ed?
I think in the higher ed space, I think that a lot of students, and particularly students of color, definitely struggle with what's known as imposter syndrome, and sort of feeling like you need to be, especially if you're in very rigorous academic spaces, feeling like you need to be on your game all the time and feeling like that is like, if you're not, then you're not as good. And I think that's very much so emphasized in a virtual environment where you may only have 50 minutes to get through a class and you may feel like you're not participating enough, or you may feel like you're not engaged enough. And I think that manifests differently in high school. I think that in high school, you sort of can see, uh, you may not feel that as much. So I think that's a particular challenge that educators need to be aware of, is that students are feeling that heightened level of like academic anxiety, because they feel like they're in an advanced academic space. And I think that's something that, in that transition between, educators should just be aware of, that can impact the students' self-confidence, and then that will impact sort of the learning experience. So
Yeah, no, I think that that's a good, that's a good perspective. I wonder, I have another question. These are coming through really fast now, so I'm going to keep passing them on to people. Like, Jaime, you had mentioned earlier that like you had a challenge in like your virtual exchange. There was like a miscommunication, and so maybe I'll put this question to you then. The question is, what is the time you experienced a conflict or difficult conversation or uncomfortable moment in a virtual course or online group learning environment? And then what support did the other participants give, or what support, or how did the instructor handle the situation? What could have been done better? I know educators are really concerned about like conflict or like difficult or uncomfortable conversations in virtual spaces. And so maybe what are some ways that participants can handle that really well, or educators can intervene? What do you think?
I guess the conflict could happen, especially when everyone is talking at the same time and no one is listening to each other. So
Yeah.
I believe that this is the role of the teacher or the mentor of the whole speech. I believe this option of turning off mics of people and making everyone listen to everyone is really important, and it will lead us to not have any conflict. And also during class, of course, we should be far from any political or race discussions that might lead to such things. So for example, in my exchange program, we didn't have a professor or a leader. So what we were doing is we split tasks between each other. So for me, for example, I was the communication manager of the team, and I was the one leading this conversation and giving the right to speak to each one. Not the right to speak, everyone has the right, but given access to
Giving the
speak.
access, permission, yeah.
Exactly, permission to speak to everyone. And making sure that all the ideas were clear.
Yeah, no, I think that's good to like delegate kind of some of that responsibility, also to control like who's talking when, to make sure there's not this like overwhelming like pile on. So I think like managing the communication kind of in the same way we do in a classroom, like through different ways, but like making sure that that's being able to be replicated online. It's a good
Exactly.
suggestion.
And I guess this is in the e-learning, it's even easier, because in a classroom, you just say please be quiet, but not everyone just would follow what you are saying. But
Yeah.
in but in an e-learning, you just can be a dictator and turn off people's mics.
Yeah, I could just mute you.
Right
Yeah,
away.
that's fair. But that might not be like the best, but like it's possible. And maybe like Andre, I'll shoot a question to you. We've talked a lot today about like a lot of like activities, and maybe like the icebreaker activity that might be good for like synchronous learning, which is like when we're all like learning, like engaging at the same time, or even like video conferencing like we are right now. That's easier to do like in a Zoom platform. But what are some activities that maybe some effective activities that a teacher could do like asynchronously? So when it's like not all at the same time, maybe like sending messages or that kind of thing. Andre, have you ever done an activity where like in a virtual learning class that's like not video conferencing, not all at the same time? Is there some sort of activity that could be done then that's effective?
I'm not sure. I don't think I've like in my experience I've I don't recall
Mhm.
doing any of those activities that aren't all at the same time. Um, um, but I don't know. I think if it were to be, I mean, from the top of my head, I think if it were to be like either small activities or small responses that through all the emails that a professor would send out to their students
Mhm.
to respond with either like like an important answer or a necessary answer that the professor needs for the class, but also one that's not like maybe a bit more personal, a bit more fun, something that is just engaging and that isn't like that a student wouldn't feel like it's kind of a burden for you to like spend time to respond. You know what I'm saying? To make it a
Yeah.
bit more light and be able to like I don't know have a chance of developing a better connection with your student.
Yeah, I think like some of these asynchronous activities are some things that just like can be like professor to student, right? And like and then like also like giving the student, sometimes asynchronous activities are really good to like give a chance to think and respond. So maybe
Yeah.
like a discussion board or like a storytelling activity or something like that, where like you really have time to sit and think and then like post, right? Or like I think it's easy to like share video, or even like maybe like use some of the social media like platforms that we engage in, right? That I think there are ways to facilitate it a little bit differently. Maybe one last question that I'm going to throw out for everybody before we move to our final question that I have for you that I prepared earlier is sorry, I just lost it. I think it's a good way to end it. So I'll let any one of you respond that wants to. Like, as we are at home studying during this pandemic, what are some things we can do to get away, to get out from our like comfortable atmosphere that's created in our homes? So is there a great way to avoid our personal life from taking more space? So I think like right now we're all like kind of like stuck in our homes studying. Is there a way that we can like challenge ourselves? This question can go either way, like challenge ourselves like academically, or also just to like, yeah, is there a way that it's easy from our home studying that we are just like, oh, I'm going to do what's easy? Is there a way that we can challenge ourselves?
I believe the best.
Sorry, sorry.
Go ahead. Thank you. So I believe that it would be really nice if we can make a list of all the things that we've been looking to do during our whole life, and we didn't have to, because we always say that we want to train, we don't have time. We want to learn this skill, we don't have time. So I believe now, because of this pandemic, this pandemic actually challenges us that we do what we want, and it's saying to us that you really have time, you are not just doing what you want, you are just being lazy.
Yeah.
So I believe that it would be nice if we can make a list of all the things we've been thinking about doing during our whole lives and making plans. I believe also that time management is the best thing we can learn from this pandemic, and that we can use in order to learn as much as we can and use this time, this free time we're having, as much as we can.
Hmm. Okay. Anybody else? Yeah, Andre, go ahead.
Yeah, I think adding on to what Shaima was saying, I think one of the biggest things that I've learned over time that was really, really helpful is setting routines for yourself. And that could be just with either doing like FaceTime calls or Zoom calls with your friends to study. And also in order to like to keep that social aspect of FaceTiming with your friends, to like something that worked for me was like that was very difficult at the beginning was doing every day at least for like 30 minutes working out with my friend. So like we would like FaceTime each other and we would like do like a small like ab workout or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Just to like keep that every, you know what I'm saying? So that every day it's like you're able to like, okay, I can't just like sit on my bed and watch Netflix because like, I have to get up and work out, or I have to like, I have a meeting with my friend to like, work on a reading or on a problem set or, so yeah, I think just setting routines is something that is very difficult. I'll take from experience, is very difficult to
Yeah.
follow it from the beginning. But if you're able to stick with it, even if it's just small things, not something that you plan out every single hour or minute of your day, but just little things here and there can go a long way.
Yeah, I think that's really that's a good advice. Like, one, to like make a list of stuff that you want to accomplish and then try to do it during the pandemic, and then also make a connection, maybe that's not academic, like a connection to work out or a connection to like connect with someone else. So that's really important. And I also want to like, the educator in me wants to balance that with like, everybody should be kind to themselves. Like, everybody's facing a lot. Don't maybe like take on an additional course just to like challenge yourself because you're already in front of the screen all day. So maybe like pick something that you could do off screen. So maybe that's my answer to this question, even though it wasn't asked to me. But I'm going to pause here. We're going to cycle out soon. I want to ask a last quick fire question to you all. As we wrap this up, what is one piece of advice really quickly that you would give a fellow student from one of your classes or from your virtual exchange programs to succeed in the coming semester? So maybe Sam, we can start with you, and then we'll go to Shaima and then Andre.
I think that what I've been saying much earlier in this webinar is just the fact that we all are coming with our own individual experiences, and that each student, each educator, every person in the virtual learning community, we all need to understand that a lot is coming at us at very quickly in the world as the world continues to evolve, and that we should just be patient and understand that those experiences are valid and those experiences mean something and add something to the group. So my advice would just, for every interaction you have, whether it's virtual or distance, be patient with the person that you're interacting with and really try to understand where they're coming from, because I think that once that genuine relationship is made, it makes the learning experience for everyone so much better.
Yeah, definitely. Shaima, what about you?
I would say that we should learn how to be effective from this, and be and you get used to this experience, because it will. First, we don't know when it's gonna finish, and second, it's gonna open the doors to so many opportunities, not only in our countries but worldwide.
Yeah, it's true. It's good. Andre, what about you?
Yeah, and this I think this does go hand in hand with Chima, that because we don't know how long this is going to last for. I mentioned this before too, but like everyone does have their own distinct challenges and individual challenges that they have at home, in their life, and with like online learning. So from the beginning, it can be hard, but if you need resources that you aren't getting access to, or there are resources that you don't know how to reach out to the professor to be able to get access to, do your best to be proactive and to get those resources, because we do have to get used to this, because for the better or for not, like this is something that is we do have, yeah, to keep it short, we do have to get used to this. So being able to just reach out and get access to the resources that you need in order to succeed, and that you need in order to just be able to learn, is really, really important. So yeah.
That's great. I think that's such a good note to end on. I'm going to share my screen really quickly again with everyone, just so people can see ways to engage with the Stevens Initiative. But I want to say thank you to all three of you for taking so much time to prepare for this webinar, and for sharing really your expert opinion on and expert advice on how to be successful in these virtual learning environments. It's been so great talking to you all, and thank you so much for taking the time. And so with that, we're going to close up. We want to say thank you for attending. You can see different ways to engage with us at the Stevens Initiative on the screen right now. Once we close out the webinar, it's going to send you to a survey. We encourage you all to take that survey and let us know what you thought about today and what you'd like to see from us in the future. And with that, we'll wrap it up. Thanks again to the three of you so much for attending. It's been really great, and we hope everybody learned something today. So we'll sign off. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks. So.
Bye.